People die in the middle. People are too afraid to take any extreme stance on anything, but usually the middle choice, the average choice, is the worst choices of all. And that's true for life, that's also true for investing. So let's talk about work, for example. When you've got a very easy job, a 9 to 5 job, maybe a job that even finishes at 4 o'clock, then you're not going to make life-changing money, but at least you've got a life after work. You can still meet friends, you can still hang around with your family, you still have some kind of a good deal here if you've got an easy job. If you've got a very hard work life, let's say you've got your own company, let's say you try to scale this up, then you don't have much time for friends and family, but on the other hand, you might be able to make money where you can retire early and then maybe have a nicer life in the future. But if you're stuck in the middle, right, you've got a job that pays kind of okay, but you're not getting paid for any overtime. You have to work until 7, 8, maybe 9 o'clock on some days. You cannot really meet your family, but you're also not getting out of that rat race. You're stuck in the middle. It's the worst of the choices. You should make a very easy work life or a very hard work life. The middle path is usually the hardest. And it's true for many things. It's even true for consumption. Right? Let's say you buy a car. If you buy a really crappy car, a very cheap car, maybe a car that's 20, 25 years old, that doesn't have yet too many miles, but it's very cheap to run, right? Let's say an old Toyota, then it's okay, you can save a lot of money, you get the best bang for buck, you're just using the car for transportation. So that's a good choice. The cheapest of the choices is basically the best value for money. A good choice is also to go very high end, to buy something that's rare, that's not going to depreciate as much. We can potentially resell this for very little depreciation, maybe potentially even appreciation in a few years. The worst choice, again, is the thing in the middle. You buy a new mass-produced car that's going to depreciate 20, 30, 40% after just a few years. You're losing a lot of money, but you don't have an extremely nice experience because you don't buy the very expensive thing. But you also don't save any money because you don't buy the cheap thing. Again, the middle path is the worst. You could even extend this to personal life, right? Let's say for choosing your wife, choosing your spouse, if you have somebody that's very supportive of you, maybe that does not focus on career. You've got somebody that can help you all the time and you can basically outsource a lot of the work that you don't want to take care of. You can 100% just focus on supporting your family. If you've got somebody that's eye level, right, that's also good because then it can contribute to the family income. But if you've got somebody that isn't really supportive that much, wants to have its own career, but the career doesn't really match up to your own income, then the contribution to the household won't be high enough, but also the individual support won't be enough to help you to value that relationship enough. So if you just look at this objectively, right, again, the extreme cases are probably the best. Somebody that earns as much as you, or that has similar ambitions as you, or somebody that isn't at all on that level, but that can support you on your endeavor enough so that then the overall income or the overall life standard of the family, the overall security of the family gets pushed up that way. So in many, many cases, taking the middle route is usually the worst case. And the same is true for investing as well. In investing, in general, across any market, it's not just in the stock market or in the crypto market, in any market, returns are very much concentrated towards a few assets and towards a few market participants. So if you just choose the average stock, right, you choose the middle, you buy Disney, or you buy Sony, or you buy Nintendo, you just buy something average, right? You buy Procter and Gamble. Very likely, with that stock, you're going to do worse compared to just the S&P 500 index ETF or the Nasdaq 100 index ETF. So the average return is higher than the median return. So a lot of the performance is concentrated towards a few stocks. And that concentration also happens just in short spurts of time. So you don't have constant outperformance. The same is true in crypto, right? The vast majority of altcoins tend to underperform Bitcoin most of the time. We've got short altcoin rally spurts where there's a few alts that make multiple X returns, but for most altcoins, most of the time, they tend to do worse than Bitcoin. And it's the same for stocks. And as we just said here at the beginning, with the car market, it's the same, right? The vast majority of cars are going to depreciate. A few ones are going to be rare enough that they will still be in demand in 10, 20, 30 years, and they might appreciate together with monetary debasement, of course. You're not really going to make net purchasing power appreciation with a car, usually, because the monetary debasement is 6.8% per annum, and most cars don't appreciate at that rate, even the very rare cars. But that's another topic, right? In general, right, this is consumption. Consumption tends to lose money over time, or tends to lose at least purchasing power over time. But in general, the market structure is the same across any market. The vast majority of gains are made in a very small number of assets. And so because of that, we also then have to ask ourselves, right? If we want to make money with investments, where do we want to be? Do we want to be very hands-off and basically not think about this at all, just buy the ETF? Or do we want to be hands-on? If we want to be hands-on though, then we have to be okay to basically make this our full-time thing. Right? If we want to beat the crypto market, we're not going to beat it by just doing random altcoin diversified portfolios. We're going to beat this by investing many, many hours every day into the topic so that you then become part of the few winners. Right? 20% of the assets might outperform the average, but if you look at market participants and you want to outperform regularly, it's maybe only 10% or 5% that really significantly outperform the average. If there is one investor that makes, say, 30, 40% alpha per annum, there have to be many other investors that underperform the average, because most people don't lose everything, right? So in order to just get a few outperformance, we need many underperformers, and returns are concentrated. And so what I want to say here is it's very important to think about what your actual target is, what you actually want to achieve. And it's very important not to be afraid of those extreme choices. If you're currently at a stage in life where you don't necessarily have to impress other people, but where you're simply building up your net worth, where you want to maybe then afterwards multiply that net worth, where we maybe want to have, say, 1, 2, 3 years of your annual income saved up in order to then grow this by actively trading. If that's your plan, then it's no problem at all to take extreme measures with consumption, right? To buy the cheapest of the cars, to maybe rent a place that's way cheaper than what all your peers have, to go the extreme route, because then you do get the best bang for buck, and then you're not stuck in the middle. If you want to build your wealth, it's okay to have, besides your regular job, maybe also another side hustle, to sell much more of your time than other people do. If you make your own business, it's okay to shoot very high, because there's a good chance that maybe even the business that scales very well isn't even that much harder to run than a business that doesn't scale. Is it really fundamentally, when you think about this, that much harder to create, say, a pizza chain, a pizza delivery chain, compared to running your own little pizza shop? It's maybe not that much harder. It's a different kind of work you have to do. You have to be more analytical. You have to figure out how to do franchise operations. You have to figure out the people that maybe have already been able to do something similar in the past. Find those people might be harder, but in the end, making that kind of business successful might not be much harder than just running a localized business, right? Running a local gym, right? If you say in the fitness industry, running a local gym might not be that much less difficult compared to, say, becoming a fitness influencer and selling, say, fitness courses, right? That's much more scalable. So thinking about these kind of things, right, going with the extremes is usually much better compared to just doing something that feels safe in the moment. If you just have the average job, if you just have the average business, if you just do the average consumption, you're not getting anywhere. And people are afraid of taking extreme measures because it's different to what everybody else does, right? Most people just think that the middle is safe. But But unfortunately, the middle is all but safe, right? Doing the average business is not safe. Buying just the average stock, Coca-Cola stock, it's not really safe over the long term. Over the long term, you will get debased with most stocks. Most stocks underperform just the S&P 500. Returns are concentrated. Benefits in life are concentrated. And so we have to be very intentional about what we actually want to achieve, and then not be afraid of taking those extreme stances, of doing things that most people don't do. Because while this might not work out every now and then, right, if we shoot for the stars, if we try to achieve something great, while this might not work out, if we do this often enough, at some point it will, right? We only have to become rich once. We don't have to make 100 million, 200 million, 300 million. Once we are at 10, we are fine, right? Then we can live from passive income 100%. Or another way to look at this, right, if your expenses aren't that high, once you are at 20 years of your annual expenses and you're happy with where you are in terms of consumption, right, if you don't want to increase your lifestyle anymore, you're happy where you are, you have 20 years of expenses, then you can completely retire. Once you are at 2 to 3 years of income or of expenses, depending on how you want to see it, once you are at 2 to 3 years of income, then you can focus much more on active investing, because then the outperformance that you make over just buying and holding an ETF then matters. When you only have, say, 1 or 2 months of your income saved up, and then you make an additional 10-20% on top of that, this doesn't really change much in terms of your net worth. It changes maybe in terms of how much you learn about the market, how much you might make in the future. It's a learning exercise, but it's not really a wealth building exercise. The wealth building really only happens once you are at the 2 to 3 year mark, because now, let's say you're at 3 years, you're able to make 20% alpha over just buying and holding random ETFs. 20% alpha over 3 years of income, that is 7 months roughly of additional income per year. Right, so you have your 12 months of income that you do from your job. You've got another 7 months of income that you have from your active investing, from your active trading. So then it matters, right? Once you're at 2-3 years, then it matters. When you're below that, if you're just at a few months, it doesn't really matter in terms of wealth building. It matters in terms of learning things, in terms of maybe not making big mistakes once you are at the 2 to 3 year mark. So in that sense, it makes sense to already learn about these things. But it doesn't really bring you forward that much. So in the early days, it really makes sense to reduce your expenses, to push your savings rate to 30, 40, 50%. And if your savings rate can't be that high because you've already minimized your expenses that much, then just figure ways to sell more time, to get this additional side hustle. That's how I personally made it. So I started out with simply having my full-time job, and for 3 to 4 years, I had a side income. I did freelance programming for other companies on the side, where I did my own where I had my programming job and my program management job. I did this for a few years until I had a few years of income that I saved up, and then I invested this actively into crypto and in other asset classes as well. But this is what you have to be okay with. You have to be okay with taking extreme stances, with working much more than others, with not going out, with not getting drunk on the weekend. You have to be okay to wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, to have those early hours where you can focus on stuff. That in turn, right, we want to sleep enough to stay healthy, to be focused. That in turn means we have to sleep much earlier. We sleep at 8 or 9 o'clock so that we have our 7-8 hours of sleep, that we can get up early, that we can work on our thing in the morning. Those are the kinds of extreme measures that other people don't take, right? Other people are not willing to work that many hours. They're not willing to take this extra time out of the day. They're not willing to sacrifice some of their free time. But yeah, things compound over the long term. And the middle is where people die. If you just do what everybody else does, you get what everybody else is doing. If you do something else than what the vast majority is doing, you are getting something else. If that's always going to be better, that's the big question, right? You have to be smart about what you're doing different to the masses, but you at least have a chance of achieving something that most people aren't. And this is, I think, where a lot of satisfaction also comes from, especially if you have a competitive mindset, if you want to live a better life than most other people, if you don't want to be stuck in an office until late in the evening, if you want to have the time with your children, if you want to see them grow up, if you want to be able to be at home, to potentially work from home, you have to arrange things in a different way, where most people are just okay with doing things as they come. And living on autopilot, living like the average, I think is for most people not the right thing, right? If you ask most people, are you happy with where you are right now? And you ask those people that just live the average life, most people will say no. And that's understandable, right? Because returns are concentrated, happiness of life choices, I believe, are probably concentrated as well. Most life choices don't lead to a happy life, a few of them do. And so just think about where you're willing to take extreme measures, take an extreme stance where others might not have that stance, that might make your personal life happier, where you might be able to break out, right? Where you might be able to do something that others are not. And investing, it's the same thing, right? Don't just buy the average stock, don't just do the average things. Either go the 100% hands-off route, just get into ETFs, and probably that's the right thing if you're not yet at the 2 to 3 year income mark, right, in terms of net worth. And once you're across that, if that's your thing, then you can get more active and start to generate some alpha in the market. And this can be any market, right? This can be crypto, this can be stocks, this can also be properties. You can also just buy fixer-upper properties, check the listings every day, find something that's under market value, and then flip this in a few years after you've fixed it up, you've increased the rents, etc. Or you can refinance. There's many ways to roam. You have to focus on one market where you can achieve outperformance by putting in more time than the average market participant. And probably you have to be much better than just the average, right? You have to be in the top 10% or so to really achieve significant alpha that's worth your time. And of course, you need the capital to start with. Hope that was an interesting little ramble that where you maybe got a few points. Most people haven't really thought about this yet. Feel free to give this a like, of course, it helps the channel grow. Feel free to also send this video to others, to people that might find this content helpful. See you next time. Cheers.